All right, Scottie Kimmelman here with the National Sports Media Association, and today I'm joined by the 2023 Iowa Sportscaster of the Year and sports anchor at KWWL, Mark Woodley. Mark, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, Scotty. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Um, Thanks for hopping on. I really appreciate the time. And before we get into your time working as a sportscaster for all the various sports in Iowa, I want to first ask you what got you into sportscasting in the first place?
Well, back in high school, Scotty, I was a 3 to 4 sport athlete. I quit track after my sophomore year, so we dropped from 4 to basketball, baseball, ran track and cross country, and I kind of, I had no real future in playing sports. I loved being around the game, so I had to find a way to stay around sports, and this seemed to be it. I did a lot of extracurriculars too, like acting and speech and stuff, so it kind of all went together pretty well.
Right. That's awesome. And now I know you grew up in Iowa, and I'm sure you love watching sports in Iowa as a kid, whether that be, college sports, professional, all different kinds of sports. But is there any reason in particular why you decided to stay in Iowa itself, rather than going on a more national scale, a different state? Is there any reason why Iowa you wanted to stick with it?
I've been asked that a few times, and to me, this is home. My kids, my family, we're all rooted here. My mom lives like 3 blocks away from where I'm at,
Hmm.
but I get to cover all the teams that I watched growing up. My mom is from Ames. We went to games at Jack Trice Stadium, at Hilton Coliseum all the time growing up, watching Iowa State basketball, Iowa State football, and just loved it. And still being able to cover that team has been fantastic. Now, my wife is from Iowa City, so that's kind of had to bring me into the middle, along with the job as well. It's been fantastic covering the Hawkeyes. Her brother was actually a former kicker at Iowa
Right.
back in about 1993. But, just being around all these sports that I love, and I love the people I work with. There's an anchor at our station named Ron Steele, who I grew up watching, who I think is one of the best in the business. And that's a guy who stuck around here for 50 years. He is celebrating his 50th year right now. And the fact that a guy that, I grew up watching in elementary school, who covered a lot of our stuff when I was in high school, the fact that I've been able to work with him for the last 20 years has been
Mhm.
incredible. So, I love being around family. I love the sports I cover. And this is a great market, really, too. For college sports, we have 3 Division I colleges that we cover regularly in Iowa State, Iowa, and the University of Northern Iowa. All of them have
Mhm.
done pretty successful things over, the course of my career. It's a
Mhm.
fantastic college sports market. I mean, to us, those are our professional teams because there aren't any in the state of
Mhm.
Iowa. We've got the Hawkeyes, the Panthers, and the Cyclones, and it's just been really fun to be around the game, all this time with all these teams that I grew up watching.
Right. That's awesome. And, I know from your time working, starting in high school and going through your entire career, you said it's a big market, with the different colleges, all of that. But I want to ask you more specifically as a broadcaster covering the different sports. I don't know how many sports exactly that you've covered, but what would you say, I guess, broadcasting different sports, how much skill do you think is required in that? And how important do you think it is for a young broadcaster? Like there's myself and countless others that are broadcasting several different sports. How important do you think that is?
It's important to have really good speech skills. Like I said, I grew up in high school, did a lot of acting, a lot of speech stuff, and that really helped me get into this. But as far as needing those skills initially, no, from where I was when I started in this business 20 years ago, I look at some of the stuff that I did back then, and
Hmm.
it is awful. I look back at that stuff and I wonder like how I managed to even keep a job back then. But
Hmm.
it's something you develop over time. So, you know, the ability to learn is much more important than having the skills coming into this.
Right. Right. Gotcha. And I'm sure, I mean, you've been covering sports, you said, for 20 years now in this field. And, I'm sure you've seen a lot of things that have gone on in the college realm specifically. But is there one moment that you remember in specific where you thought, wow, I really made it as a broadcaster and like this is what it's all about for what I want to do?
The funny thing, Scotty, is I've been doing this for 20 years, and the wow moments, the biggest wow moments, have come within the last 2 years. And I
Really? Of
figure you might know where I'm going with this, but we're talking about Caitlin Clark.
course,
Caitlin
yeah.
Clark is a generational talent. I mean, look at what she's done for women's sports. They're selling out games at Iowa. On the road, they're selling out every game she's played in. Most of the time, you need $200-300 just to get inside the building. This is something we've never seen in women's sports, and it's something that I hope that carries on. I mean, look, 17,000 people showed up at Gainesbridge Fieldhouse on
Yeah.
Monday to watch Caitlin Clark get drafted. And they weren't at the draft. They were watching it on television. They were watching on a Jumbotron in Indianapolis. I mean,
Mm.
being able to follow her career, follow the Hawkeyes. I got to cover 2 straight national championship games the last couple of years, and it's been unbelievable. And I
Right.
don't know if we'll ever see anything like her again. I hope we do because it's been incredible. But yeah, those have been the wow moments. I mean, going back
Mm.
when I was younger, I got to cover Minnesota Vikings football games when I was up in Mason City, Iowa. It was about 2 hours north to go there. And being a
Mm.
really young broadcaster and covering NFL games, those were wow moments then. But even 20 years later, I still have wow moments. And I guess that's probably what kept me in the business.
Yeah. And I guess with that idea, the whole Caitlin Clark era must have been amazing as a broadcaster for you. But with that, do you notice like any challenges that come with that, or do you see it as just an amazing opportunity to get more coverage and better coverage, really? Or do you see it just as a challenge at all?
It's definitely been a challenge because 3 years ago, if you went to Caitlin Clark's games when she was a freshman or sophomore, the only ones there were all of us local guys. It was very
Mhm.
easy to get access. The
Right.
coaches, everybody very readily available. Now that, a whole bunch of national broadcasters have jumped in on this, our access was somewhat limited. I actually credit the University of Iowa because they could have completely shut us out when ESPN, the Today Show, and everybody else started showing up, and they still have given us decent access. But it's much harder to cover the Caitlin Clark story right now than it was 3 years ago. But
Mhm.
we figured out a way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And lastly, those are all the main questions I want to ask. I want to ask if there's any advice you'd want to give to a young broadcaster. I know there's so many out there. What would you want to tell them as they're going up, trying to get a job, trying to get a position, and trying to get their voice out there? What would you tell them?
Well, Scotty, I don't know if you know anything about my history in the last couple of years, but my biggest advice would be to go out, cover a blizzard in negative 40 degrees, complain about it for 90 seconds, put it on Twitter, and get 34 million people to watch it. That was
Yeah, I
probably
noticed.
the one thing that got me a little more known in the 20 years of sports coverage that I've done. But real advice for everybody, put your name out there, do everything you can to get noticed, pretty much.
Mm.
Because when I started in this business, again, I mentioned I was awful. I mean, you have no idea how bad I was. But I learned a lot in the first couple of years because I had some great mentors. And the one thing I did is I kept putting myself out there. I applied for every job under the sun. I probably sent out, 120, 130 tapes because back then we were sending out tapes. We weren't sending out YouTube links, which
Right.
it made it a little bit easier on news directors, I'm sure. And I got rejected by pretty much 119 out of the 120. But you always, need to keep trying to find that one person who sees that potential, who sees, what you're trying to do in this business. And so if you keep putting yourself out there, you give yourself more chances. And once you get in, that's when you start getting better.
Right. That's awesome. That's amazing advice. Thank you. Well, that's all I have. Thank you again for joining, and congratulations on the award. Appreciate the time.